Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
Hello, a very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, putting in perspective the 6th Ibrahim Index of African governance. What does it say about governance in Africa and Uganda in particular? Today, the Mo Ibrahim Foundation released the 6th report about governance in Africa, indicating that human rights, political freedoms, transparency and accountability have deteriorated in African powerhouses over the past 6 years. The report indicates that Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and Egypt dropped in the rankings and in 2 of the 4 categories used in the index to assess good governance across the continent. Nigeria was singled out as the worst performer of the 4, dropping into the bottom 10 in the overall rankings for the first time, with a ranking of 43rd out of the 52 countries listed overall. Although South Africa, Egypt, and Kenya ranked 5th, 14th, and 25th respectively, the report notes that people's freedoms to participate in political processes has declined in each country. Uganda, which is marking 50 years of independence, is ranked 9th, while Tanzania is one of the top 10 countries. Mauritius tops the index as the best country according to the parameters used. Because of the bad trend, there is no winner for this year for the world's most valuable individual prize. The Mo Ibrahim Prize for Good Governance in Africa, which is a $5 million prize. It is supposed to be awarded each year to a democratically elected leader who voluntarily leaves office. There was also no winner in 2009, 2010 as well, because the panel said there had been no suitable candidate found. Previous winners were Botswana's President Festus Mogae and Mozambique's Joaquim Chissano. So tonight we look at these findings, what they mean for Africa as a whole, the East African community, and Uganda in particular. Our guests tonight: Mr. Asuman Basalirwa, President of the Justice Forum Party. You're most welcome, Mr. Asuman Basalirwa.
Thank you very much, Radio 1, and good evening to all our listeners.
We're also joined by Mr. Rwomushana, a former head of political intelligence at State House. You're most welcome, Mr. Rwomushana.
The Almighty God is great.
We're also joined by Ms. Bireete, Director of Programs at the Center for Constitutional Governance.
Thank you very much, and good evening, listeners.
Charles, what's your reading of these latest results?
But this is did he become God today?
The results are fake.
Go on. The results are
fake. Because how can you say Uganda is 19?
Yes.
How can out of the 2 countries, how can someone who gets 0 be 19 out of the 2 countries?
What do you mean Uganda gets 0?
Because if we talk about safety and rule of law in a country where you have people found in homes and slaughtered, whole family. Not 1 incident, not 2 incidents, not 3. Children being burnt in schools. Now the other day I had an insane lady, woman, because they sold their land. You're talking about even corruption, where more than 63 billion is stolen. With all of these controls, and mind you, there were demonstrations of these fellows who were working in East Africa, and the pensioners they were in demonstrations, putting pressure on government to pay them. Now, when money is available, then you have fake claimants generated, and there is collaboration between finance, public service, Bank of Uganda, and even the recipient commercial bank, that all pensioners are paid from Cairo Bank. I don't even think it has branches in Masaka. Now, so the 63 billion shillings is stolen, and that has been the story throughout. Children back in schools, markets being banned, people being killed, where a mad woman is jailed, is put in custody together with the one who has arrested him, and all of, and then she generates fire, and all of them are banned. Now, how can you say that kind of performer has scored and is now 19th? And are these fellows on the ground?
Why should Uganda be 52 out of 52?
Because even 52 is good position. 52 is good position. Should be getting zeros. Because imagine these are your children.
Yes.
Yes. Imagine people who are dying out of this. And you know there is no action. There is no action. Yes.
Well, but you're being sensational. Those are things that have happened over the past. Well, at least the killings that you're talking about, the random killings in Mityana and Moran.
Give me the good
They've been about.
Give me the good thing.
The last
Uganda government can't build this dam at Jagari, $100 million. We must get somebody. And then
It costs $870 million.
We can't raise that money as Uganda government.
And guarantee alone.
Sarah, talk to us. It seems we have rebels all around. Sarah, talk to us about you. What's your reading of this index?
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll start on the positive note. I think to me the only positive note was an improvement on gender equality. And as a woman, really, I need to highlight that. There was improvement on the equality generally in all countries with the exception of West Africa, I think, which lagged behind. But I agree with Charles Rwomushana generally. When you come to Uganda, and Uganda is 19th out of 52, especially on the question of fundamental human rights, then how are the other countries? Look at how we celebrated our Jubilee.
Yeah, how did you celebrate our Jubilee?
Locked up.
We had a lot of colors in town.
Yes, there was a lot of color in Kororo, but basically had no freedom to move. The Lord Mayor Lukwago had no freedom to move. Other leaders had no freedom to move. Political activists were held beyond 48 constitutional hours. The question of human rights and participation in political governance in Uganda is really, in my view, is in the negative. Yeah, and to see that Uganda ranks 19th, when the key considerations for the Ibrahim Foundation Index include participation, human rights, statistics, data and planning on the economic part of the country. We've run I don't know when we last conducted census in Uganda. Who is planning for Uganda? How many people do we have? Who is on the drawing board? Now, for example, we have 3 visions. Vision 2030, Vision 2040,
2040.
Which is the vision for this country?
Well, they come at different times.
And then we have the national plan.
Then all the visionaries.
So which is the focus for this country really? What direction are we taking? You saw the 10-point program read out on the Jubilee celebrations. It was a breakdown of the regional theory, 10 points program. This is just a breakdown. So where are we going?
Can I conclude my point?
Yes, sir.
So my conclusion is therefore, when you have people who want it alone, people who are put in place to manage public affairs, and now they look down and look at their stomachs and want to eat alone. Everything they see around put in their stomach, including the drugs, then you know there is going to be a problem. There is no way they will eat alone. If you move on the streets and you see the distress on people's faces, actually, by the way, now
you don't have a way to gauge that.
By the way, no, but I walk on the streets. It is safer to cross a road than to walk on the pavements. Because people go knocking you. They are extremely very distressed. You look at their faces. The society looks a sick society. Because you have got a few who have taken a decision to eat alone. Everything they run on, they eat, which is unacceptable.
Well, we have to move a little bit.
Now, that's why now they are being hit by the insane. Now, when the sane ones, if you can be burnt by the insane, when the insane ones, the sane ones take you on, that's going to be the result.
Husband Basalirwa, I implore you, please say something good about our beloved motherland. 19 is a little bit too low. We should have been a little bit higher, perhaps. What's your reading?
Well, I think we are looking at Ibrahim Index on governance.
Yes.
I have always been asking questions. Maybe my colleagues will help me answer them. In my view, these are the questions we need to ask. Who is this Ibrahim? Whom does he represent? What is his agenda? How should we treat the results of his findings? Have regional and international bodies ceded their authority, their responsibility, their oversight roles to bourgeoisies of this world? So what if Uganda is 19th? So what? Does Ibrahim have capacity to enforce any sanctions for those who perform below the expectations? He makes his yardsticks along Millennium Development Goals. So what? So for me, I find it a very, very big problem. No Ibrahim Index is not a UN body. It's not an African Union body. Okay? It's not an East African Community body. It's not SADC. It's not IGAD. Whom does he represent? What is his motivation? Why should we really be discussing him and his index? For me, I am particularly interested in those questions. But having said that, you know, a faulty watch, at one time it will become correct.
That's what some people think.
Yes, because if it got spoiled when it is midday, if it gets to midday, it will actually be reading the right time. So, having said all that,
assuming the clock hands are not broken, go on.
Yes, having said all that, let me just speak out one significant aspect he raised, that Uganda has, East Africa as a region, has gone down on aspects to do with the rule of law. Very important. Just last week, we were attending a conference by Uganda Law Society, and retired principal judge said he was giving a chronology of where we have come from, and when he was describing the current regime of NRM, he said it is no longer rule of law, but rule of tear gas.
Oh,
yes.
What about
yes,
Justice Ogola?
And I want to tell you the following aspects why somehow you could pick a leaf from this index. Torture still exists in this country. Suspects are still tortured. This country still has safe houses. In fact, as I talk now, Nasuru, Ewan Nasuru from Chiseka, was arrested on Sunday, taken to a safe house, tortured, and 3 days ago thrown in Kireka at Special Investigations Unit. I was there this afternoon talking to this young man who is an activist. Detentions without trial still exist in this country.
Or trial without detentions.
Or trial without detentions, whatever you want to call it. The 48 hours provided for in the Constitution, as elucidated to by my sister,
the IGP says 90 days.
Have not been respected.
That's what he prefers.
The IGP,
Constitution?
I know.
That's the Constitution.
No, in fact, the IGP has arrogated unto himself constitutional powers. So as we talk now, Edmond, you're a journalist. I want you on your own to take a survey in all police stations in Kampala. You are going to find suspects who have been there for more than 2 weeks. Just randomly. Any of these. In this country, we still have contempt of court orders. Again, last week, one James Tumukonde, Dr. Vesje's driver, was arrested, taken to police, CPS, detained for a week. We went to court, secured the court order, served it on Afande Kawesi, and said it's above court orders.
And Kawesi said it's above court
Yes.
orders.
In this country,
is it being quoted correctly?
I am speaking authoritatively because I met him. I was part of the group negotiating the release of Tumukunde. Eventually handed him over to me, but the following day, when the court order had been served to him the previous day. In this country, we are talking about power of the people, Article 1. And we are saying people should be governed on their own free will and consent through regular, free and fair elections. The question is do we have free and fair elections, putting the issue of regularity aside? Now, when you answer those questions, and by the way they are in the negative, all of them they are in the negative, the fact that we have gone down as a country, in my view, is not surprising, notwithstanding the doubts I have raised on the no Ibrahim. We are discussing it because perhaps there is no other peer review team. Maybe we would be discussing that, but because it is a law, Ibrahim who has given us what to discuss, we can only have a discussion on that aspect.
All right.
So given all that, there is no doubt that I think even the 19th position is a rigged one.
You think it's general?
In my view, we should have been the 52nd, as Comrade Charles Rwomushana has mentioned, and I don't see anything putting this at this level. But let me also mention what is happening elsewhere. In Kenya, for example, the events leading to the election sometime next year point to a very, very, very dangerous trend. Ethnic clashes have begun. Ethnic tensions are there.
Yes.
You hear what is happening in Mombasa,
yes,
at the coast. Up to now, people are thinking of seceding, okay, in this century. At the time when we were talking about the East African community, at the time we were thinking about political federation, some of the components in the East African community configuration are thinking about seceding. So there is a lot. The other day, the former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan was in Nairobi and was saying that he hopes, he and this other group of eminent people, that what happened 5 years ago does not happen again.
Next year.
But as we talk now, people who have been indicted by the ICC are also candidates. What a paradox. What an irony. So those are the concerns and the perspectives in which I look at this whole concept.
Well, listeners, of course, the Mo Ibrahim Index comes from is sponsored by Mohammed Ibrahim. He's a Sudanese man, a billionaire. He made his money working, owning shares in Celtel, the erstwhile Celtel. He lives in London and is extremely wealthy. He can put up $5 million for head of state who lives power voluntarily, like he did, gave Festus Mogaya some money and other people before that. Well, listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio, and tonight, putting in perspective the 6th Ibrahim Index on African governance. What does it say about governance on this continent and Uganda? In particular, our guests, Mr. Asuman, Basalirwa, President of the Justice Forum Party, just heard him speak. Ms. Sarah Bireete, New Voice, Director of Programs at the Center for Constitutional Governance, and Mr. Charles Rwomushana, former Head of Political Intelligence at State House. You will be able to call in and contribute to this discussion. Sarah Bireete, they have been your good news. Talk to us, though, about whether you think we really need this index. Is that what we need to get us out of trouble on this continent?
No, I think in the absence of other voices, we can go with it, because this should be the work of Africa peer review mechanism. But
they don't have money; they can't even fuel some jets sometimes.
I know that's the challenge. Maybe Mo Ibrahim should fund the African peer review mechanism.
He sets up his own thing.
Yes, I want to go back to the questions Mr. Basalirwa was raising on the mandate of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. Because this report was launched today in London. Why do you launch a report on African governance from London? Couldn't you launch it in Sudan, in any other country, in Addis Ababa, the capital of AU? I think it would make more sense. It's like the scenario. It's like a scenario of when the Thabo Mbeki and the Obasanjo launched the NEPAD. They were out of Africa. Why do you launch something, beyond Africa? Is it for us?
That's
what is PR mechanism?
That's things work.
Because we also know that for these rich billionaires, when you are seen to subscribe to governance or charity work, then you get tax holidays. Maybe he does it for that purpose. We would wish to come up with our own initiative where we are accountable. And maybe I would wish to add that the Mo Ibrahim, for the last 6 years,
yes,
it's just a media event. You hear of it the day of the launch, the next day in the media, end of the story. So what impact does it generate?
You think there's no engagement?
No, it's a 2-day event, media, period.
Charles,
the people are not involved.
Charles, what is Africa's biggest? What is Africa's?
She's more popular than the center she works for.
Charles, talk to us about this. What do you think is Africa's core problem?
Africa's core problem?
Oh, yes.
Charles should not be diversionary. What is the popularity going to do here?
Go on.
I was going to inform her.
Talk to us, Charles. Our time is limited.
That the Mo Ibrahim thing ends up with the media like the way you do. That's the problem. Because getting the population, these are not issues they are going to listen to.
What do you think is Africa's core problem?
Africa's core problem is the greed of the leaders. They forget that when they are finally going to rest in their graves, they will not go with anything. and they eat money meant for people who are suffering from TB, malaria, money meant for elders who are going to rest, this pension. Now you check, most of the rivers are dying simply because of the abuse of the environment.
Yes.
Now the other day, the chairman of the Presidential Committee, Parliamentary Committee on Presidential Affairs, just a simple voice that, look, let's have an organized city. So if someone erects a structure in the middle of the road, it should be brought down. He received the threat, stood outside the gates of Parliament and yelled, look, I'm receiving calls, I'm under threat, and his wife was killed by burning. You see, and of course that's an attack on democracy. You can't have it. You can't have it anywhere in democratic societies, and there is a statement condemning it. And I said there should have been a statement from very serious people in the executive condemning this kind of act. But the reason is,
well, police is still investigating, obviously.
But you condemn first. Condemn as you look out for the one who.
Well, you could bias police.
You condemn. The act is like now. Police. Well, I've condemned it. I condemn the act of killing wives of politicians, or children of politicians who are activists. I condemn it. So I'm inviting the others to condemn it. Let's first condemn the act. Now, and of course, this is an attack on democracy. And the reason is simple: you are a friend if you support the agreed. If you say, oh, it's very good, eat everything you come across, karom, wogo, posho, then you're a friend. But the moment you say it's very dangerous to want to eat alone, and then others are under distress because they can't pay fees, they can't meet their bills, then you become an enemy.
Asuman, how do you think we can get out of this? He underlines the point of greed. Maybe you agree with him, or you maybe want to broaden it a little bit. But before we go to hear from, we go for the break. Talk to us about how you think can be done to resolve that problem.
Well, I want to go back to Ibrahim.
Yes.
In my view, I don't know his advisors. I don't know how I can send a message to him. I would think that given that he's blessed by enormous resources, I would think that rather than engage in expositions and publications of this nature, he could do more in trying to finance aspects that will engender the rule of law, that will engender
people who hand over power.
Exactly.
He does.
And that goes to my next point. What has been the impact of that move on governance?
What's your reading?
For example, when President Museveni was asked about the 5 million, you recall what he said.
What did he say?
Okay? He said, one, I am not looking for a job. Number two, I am not a poor man.
It
didn't do anything to stop Museveni.
According to my calculations, taking 5% of the 450,000, multiplying that by 8, minus 36,000 here, dividing by 72, then...
Is calculating your loan too complicated? Get a personal loan from Standard Chartered. With a low fixed arrangement fee of 300,000 shillings, we'll process it in 1 day. Plus, we'll come to you to arrange it. Just call 0414-340077 or visit standardchartered.com.
Terms and conditions apply. Standard Chartered. Here for good. Open an ice-cold Nile Gold, but don't drink it just yet. Take a closer look. You'll see the rich golden color. Get closer still, and you can't miss the fresher aroma. But you'll also find something else. You won't see it, but you'll certainly taste it. The unmistakable, crisp, maltier taste that can only be crystal malt. It's what makes Nile Gold beyond the ordinary. And that really is the mystery of Nile Gold. Nile Gold Crystal Malt Lager, beyond the ordinary. Not for sale to persons under 18. Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight. Putting in perspective the 6th Ibrahim Index on African governance. What does it say about governance in Africa and Uganda in particular? Our guests tonight, Mr. Asuman Basalirwa, President of the Justice Forum Party, Ms. Bireete, Director of Programs at the Center for Constitutional Governance, Mr. Rwomushana, former Head of Political Intelligence at State House. You will be able to call in and contribute to this discussion. Mr. Asuman Basalirwa, how can Uganda get to the top? Well, want to enter the first world. How do we do it on governance issues?
It's really a very broad question. And I'm among those who really believe that Africa, Uganda in particular, Africa in general, our bottleneck to development is really political. We have governance issues. In fact, we have leaders who are egocentric. They don't think about the country. They actually think about themselves. And I've told you, for this country to move forward in various aspects, our leaders must be exemplary in all aspects.
What
they must lead by example.
How? Explain that.
Yes. For example, if we are talking about the issue of corruption, then the top must be free from blame.
The ministers, the PSs,
the president first.
Well, the president
in that hierarchy. What is cushioning him now is the immunity he enjoys. You don't know a plethora of cases that will be opened against him the moment he leaves power. So now it is a question of immunity. So it's really a question of being exemplary in all aspects. Number two, the patriotism we are talking about must not be sung like a lullaby. That patriotism must be practical.
It is being preached.
Yes, but it must not be preached like a lullaby.
It's being taught.
Yes,
to people like
you. I have told you here before, I am patriotic. I didn't go to any patriotic school. So the leaders must be patriotic, not by word, but in terms of practice, in terms of action. The patriotism must be visible. Once they put the country ahead and they subordinate their personal interests for the good of the country, we are going to move forward. Because that has remained really a very big challenge. Our leaders here are inconsiderate to the people they lead. That's why they will not go to our local hospitals when they are sick.
What do they go, remind us?
They will go to Germany. That is why their children will not go to the schools our children go to. That's why their wives, will not deliver from the health centers where our wives deliver from. That is why, final on this point, that's why we still have schools being closed because of ghosts. You can imagine in the 21st century.
Those are what?
Yes.
Spirits?
Imagine. People are fighting for space on the moon. In Uganda,
spirits are fighting for space.
Spirits are fighting for space in schools. Have occupied. That is why we have vampires, blood suckers, attacking homes in the night in the 21st century
to suck blood.
To suck blood. That is why you have mysterious murders everywhere. So I think really, and in basic intelligence, the basic intelligence I have studied, I'm not at the level of Mr. Rwomushana.
Yes.
But basic intelligence I have studied is that when you see crime rate going up in any society, then you know security is involved.
Sarah Bireete, talk to us about your own prescription. How can this beloved country get to the top of the Ibrahim Index?
Okay, before I get to that, I want to make one comment that really surprised me in the report. There was a remark that DRC is one of the most 7 improved countries since 2000. But what's its ranking? It's 51 out of 52.
It has improved a great deal.
Yes.
According to the index.
To the report.
By 1 position.
I don't know what it was. But how can you say a country is one of the 7 most improved and it's 51 out of 52?
It's moved by 1 position from 52.
It came
from very far. Yeah, but also that.
It's dissect that for us briefly, then we'll move forward.
Yes, also that takes you up to what's the quality of this report.
The quality of the report.
For example, how did they survey Uganda? Whom did they consult? Whom did they work with? Who helped them validate Uganda's performance?
It's true.
I I have never heard of their work on a country level, but I'll go to what Uganda needs to do.
Let's get a little bit more depth on that. You're questioning its credibility.
Yes, whom do they work with?
You don't hear of it.
How do they get their statistics? I don't hear of them. You just
hear their processes.
Methodology. Yeah, methodology. How do they get their work? Whom do they work with? You just hear of their announcements in London.
Who are their partners?
Yeah. How do they gather their information? Do they just sit there and read newspapers and reports? Is it desktop, whatever, desk office research? We need to know, I think, yes, but on the governance benchmarks, I think governance benchmarks are very clear. And when you Google Uganda, if you Google the characteristics of a failed state, they are all present in Uganda today.
What are you telling us tonight?
Uganda is on the verge of becoming a failed state.
We're becoming
go on your computer, go on your internet, Google the characteristics of a failed state.
Let's talk about reality.
Okay. Look at the rule of law. Are we following our constitution, for example? You see what's happening with the oil bills in parliament. The members of parliament, the people's representatives, have people's views. Civil society has made their positions. The people have made their positions on how they want to be governed as far as oil resources is concerned. But you know what the government is doing? And the parliament had to go on recess without approving these bills. And we might have to wait for another 3-4 months, but the government is going ahead to give licenses.
They're not licensed, they've suspended that licensing.
You heard from the floor of parliament that licenses were issued by the Committee on Natural Resources. As a journalist, maybe you know better than me. But do we have the rule of law in this country? Or we have rule by law? Look at the aspect of constitutionalism. CCG, we advocate for the restoration of term limits.
That's the Center for Constitutional Governance.
Yes.
Some people think it's a bad thing. Term limits are not good for democracy.
But what do you mean? Why should we have somebody, in 1986, you told this country,
yes,
10 points program. You have achieved what you can.
Now you started.
We all know the natural law of diminishing returns. What more miracles can you perform?
You have another 10-point program. What's wrong with that?
Which is a breakdown of 3. Maybe you should call another program. We discuss the new 10 points program, which is supposed to take us to make Uganda a first world country. As Ugandans, we are stakeholders in this country. So we don't have the rule of law. We don't have constitutionalism in this country. We don't have human rights, no respect for human rights, no freedom of expression. You see what's happening on the streets of Kampala, ruled by tear gas. So are we a governance state or are we a police state?
Well, I don't know how to characterize this tonight, but I would love to hear some good news tonight. Rwomushana, Uganda has been a harbinger of peace in different places. Rwanda, DRC, now Somalia. Why don't we get some recognition for this? At least get the Nobel Peace Prize of peace, a bringer of peace, harbinger of peace in Rwanda, DRC, and now Somalia. Why can't we get a Nobel Peace Prize one of these fine days?
The moment you have a few individuals that are above the law, then peace is already threatened. There's a parliamentary question you asked, what can we do to go to number 1?
Yes.
Top of the list. We need to find a way on how to kill the greedy, a way on how to decimate them. I will give an example. There is this land, the KCC land, where which they have been fighting.
Centenary Park?
Centenary Park. And the one at the center of it is the wife of Mr. Nyakana. Mr. Nyakana is the chairperson of the Central Region. Central Division. Now the fundamental question is, could you have gotten that piece of land?
Maybe I didn't try.
Could him? With her to the Nyakana and his wife. But another person in the hierarchy of rooting has emerged.
You want to call it the hierarchy of greed? Is that what you want?
Yeah, rooting and greed has emerged. And when that happens, of course there is a conflict. Now, so what do you do? What we do is, how do we generate a strong flood to push all of them into the Rwomushana and then later on Lake Victoria?
To Lake Victoria?
Yeah. Yes.
We still have a wetland. They might trap them.
And this happened in Ghana. That's why Ghana is stable. So the formula, if you ask me for the formula, this is what we need to think about.
So we'll get to the top.
Then we'll get to the top. Forget about Parliament. Because Parliament is advisory. Actually, it's a people's advisory board. It's the government's advisory board. Because if it passes the resolutions, it takes the decisions, and you say these resolutions are not binding, but are only advisory, then you know it's finished. Because I was among the framers of this constitution.
1993, you were part of the CA.
1995, yes. And
95.
we put all hopes, we put all power in the parliament as a demonstration, as a symbol, as epitome of the people's power. The people give their power, they cede their power to parliament. And to check the executive, because we gave some authority to the executive to decide on the power of the people of Uganda. Now, the same parliament, you know, and yet by the way, members of the executive are members of parliament.
Yes.
Yes, they're members of the
Some
same
people think
parliament.
it's not
Then you sit and call it, after you have eaten meat, you call it advisory. Now, so, which other organ has remained for the population? So the only way is to do what these border borders are doing.
What are they doing?
Because the border borders in town, you know, one of
most of them are men. You don't find a woman.
When you look at border border in town, they want to report you to struck police. You know what they do to you?
What do they do?
Now you have to be extremely very careful. You go and try. You will see what they will do to you. Now, I even had the other day, I had the Inspector General of Police, I think, and some other police commander complain. You border borders, you are failing in our work. Yes. Because they are the organized. So the people ought to get organized and get organized as quickly as possible, and then we design a mechanism on what to do with the Bireete. So they teach the Bireete a lesson, and when they have learned this lesson, the resources will be there. Because Uganda had no serious resources, enough resources during Obote's time in 1960s. But
now it's different.
We had beautiful schools. You go around and check the school that Obote built, they were still at Obote built. They're still standing. But look at the schools. Now even you know why there is confusion?
Those days they actually mix sand with
You know why there is confusion?
Those days they used to have.
You know why there is confusion in the Ministry of Education?
What is that?
Because Rwanda has been a little bit strict with tenders and contracts. I have investigated it, but those institutions I know are to access
Yes. Talk to us about what you think is Africa's future. When you look at the dynamics, politics, democracy, health, economy, how do you think it's going to look like in years to come?
Well, the future is bright.
For Africa.
As a young African.
At least I can hear some good news from you.
As a young African, the future is very bright. This is a largely endowed continent in terms of mineral resources, even human resource. It may not be very developed, the human resource, but it's available. So it needs to be exploited, you know, to enhance its capacity. When you see what is happening in Zambia, you know, Michael Sata comes in, the other goes away, and there is no problem. When you see what is happening in Ethiopia, you know, the strong man goes, and somehow the country is trying to move on. When you see what has happened in Ghana, when you see what has been happening in Tanzania and most of these other countries, the future is bright. I think Africans are beginning to realize that it is possible for one strong man to go away and the country will still move forward. People are very, very, very skeptical about the future of Ethiopia. But somehow we have not had any cause. And so those examples I have given.
You cannot engineer the things that.
Yes,
how do we do it?
Those examples I have given create some future on the political front. You see the level of activism happening in South Africa. You know, the assertiveness with the miners, and what has been happening in Kenya with the doctors and the teachers, and what has been happening in Uganda here with activists, the kind of civic consciousness we have been engaged in. I think once the people get empowered, once the Africans get empowered, then we will be able to drive this continent to another level. Right. So we might be really looking at what is happening elsewhere to create some hope. Of course, I'll not mention what has been happening in is it Mauritius, where the president
Mauritius came number one actually.
Yes. Is it Mauritius or Mauritania, where the Prime Minister was shot just I think 3 days ago in a convoy. I know the person who shot said, I didn't know it was a convoy of the Mauritania. It was a convoy of the Prime Minister. I thought it was an ordinary because it does not move in pomp and ostentation. So I think as young Africans we should really be optimistic, but that should not really blind us from the fact that we have challenges which are largely a result of our own making, largely a result of poor leadership, largely a result of governance. That's why I would like this Mr. Mo Ibrahim, among the things which perhaps should really be helping us is the index should be telling us what can be done for the various African countries to rise in the index. And two, it should be important for him to support institutions that promote democracy.
Institutions that promote democracy. Let's hear from you, listeners. This is Spectrum Radio, and you can call in now. Our numbers 0414 348 111, 031 226 0390, 031 226 1390. When you call in, please tell us your name and be civil. Don't attack people. If you don't agree with them, still be civil. Spectrum, hello?
Edmond, good evening. Surely, given the name, I should not want to attack anybody, and I should not even want to put your job online. That what has been discussed in CEO this evening is very civil and very honest. If you see Rwomushana telling you what the president in Rwanda should be talking about, then we're talking about the truth. But it is the same story I've been saying over and over again on Radio 1 Spectrum from the year maybe 2002. So you shouldn't be worried. Your job shouldn't be threatened by anybody.
All right, let's stick to that point, Jimmy. Otherwise, we'll discourage. Spectrum, hello. 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 Please tell us your name and your where. And please be civil and speak logically. Yes, your name?
Yes, my name is Godfrey.
Yes, Godfrey.
Yes, I would like to thank the gentlemen, the studio, Brother Asuman and Rwomushana and Sister Bireete. Now, I wanted to say that it is not good to keep putting people on tension. Everybody is now on tension because the opposition looks to be telling us that, you see, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad. But when you look at the recent riots in the city, Brother Asuman leading people, they are stepping on people's toes, and they just want to show that they are giving people human rights, swinging arms, moving around to show that they are giving people human rights and they are activating the human rights. Now, then the other issue is about Madame Bireete. She was in a foreign mission, she made a mistake, she embezzled money. I don't know why.
All right. Okay. Well. Let's move forward. Certain things, if you cannot prove it, please don't say it at all. Spectrum, hello?
Yes.
Good evening, your name?
I'm calling from Kenya.
Yes.
But my worry about the case, somebody is the constitutional issue, and she debated in the August House. So whoever is saying that Cameroon is the solution or Uganda's problem is the source, I think he's missing that point. Another issue about Mo Ibrahim Global Award. Yeah, it's called for and it has brought something about democracy in Africa. And finally it goes to the former RDC. And that crowd they were the lead of the students in Makerere. But they should also be aware that people look on peasantry families. So to judge them on the street, they look naive, they look malicious, it's not good. We should just support them, tell them to accept land and they get food for eating and for selling. Thank you.
Spectrum, hello? Hello? Yes, please. Your name? Please talk to us and be direct to the point.
What we just need in this country, unity and social. One, people feel alienated. One day people feel they are not getting equal opportunity like others. Then that is the okay. And I think government need to work so hard on how they can make everything that they are cared for. Not just to keep defending it.
All right. Peter, thank you for calling. Spectrum, yes?
Edmond, you will just cut me off. I will just...
Okay, all right. We have to move forward. Okay. Spectrum, okay. Yes, sir, your name?
Yes, my name is William.
Yes, William.
Thank you for the program this evening. I'm also surprised at the index and the way being presented, because the ordinary person assumes that actually things are not become much worse than they really are. Than they have been presented, but that they've been presented. So I am questioning the integrity of the report itself. But beyond that, in terms of what we can do, I think first of all we need to recognize that we are victims of our own creation. When the president kept on telling people, send me MPs that actually can't speak so that I will done what? They gave him exactly that.
Okay.
And after they slipped.
All right, let's move forward.
Change the constitution.
Let's get back to the studio. Strong views coming. Okay, all right. Okay. Let's get back to the studio right now. Judge Rwomushana, let's hear some hope from you.
No,
as you respond to the callers.
I don't think there is, there is a question you raised, what is the future of Africa?
Yes.
And in my view, the future of Africa is Bireete. It's a disaster. Look at the recent past. I was trying to list very fast countries who have had war. Angola, war, Algeria, war, Egypt, war uprising, Ethiopia, war with Eritrea, Kenya, war is now fighting Al-Shabaab in Somalia, TZ, war with Uganda, 20 rebel groups.
Well, that's a long time ago. You're talking about 30 years ago.
Yeah, but this is
Tanzania with
in Africa.
Well, it's not in context.
Not know how many 20.
Well, it's not in context. It doesn't fit into the current dispensation, does it?
Talk about the 21st century.
In Uganda, we are celebrating having defeated 20 rebel groups. Rwanda, war recently, even in
but move forward. Let's not paint a bleak picture for the
and
second.
because you see, I have a background. Where we had this kind of DRC war, Burundi war, Congo war, Nigeria, it's now at war with some rebel group. It even entered in Liberia, it entered in Ivory Coast, Zimbabwe war, in Congo between Uganda and the other, Namibia war, Eritrea war with Ethiopia, Tunisia war, Liberia war, Sudan war, Central African Republic war, Chad war, Mali war, Madagascar war, uprising. Now, it's
For what period? What period are you comparing?
Because that's out of context. When you talk about Idi Amin's war, 79, that's a lot of long time ago.
These are two
that's 30 years ago.
These were two countries that went to war.
So
if you are looking at the collapse of Uganda in 1980s and of course the subsequent wars that have been taking place in Uganda, they have a foundation in that war, the Mosh Conference, and to mention about a few. Now, so you need to, where others walk, you need to run, because you have got a shaky foundation. You can't have this kind of foundation and you don't improve in the way you do business, and then you think you have got a future. That's what I'm trying to look at. Actually, wherever there are resources, oil, minerals, the population is apprehensive, simply because of the nature of the history we have had. The states, rather than invest in services, they invest in like the most spectacular event that took place during the 50th this anniversary.
Very briefly, yes.
Was the display of jets.
Well, let's get a context for celebrating. Give us some balance.
Why do you rush out from?
We're also soft lords, manufacturers.
I mean, the population was not more.
Okay, I will talk about the future of Africa.
Yes.
The future of Africa lies in unity and integration. But as you can see, this report points out about the four powerhouses of Africa:
Nigeria, Asia,
South Africa, Kenya, and Egypt.
Yes.
They have all dropped in their rankings, and they have issues with safety, rule of law, participation and human rights, and sustainable economic development. So the danger this poses is that we cannot have clear outcomes if the regional powerhouses who can determine quickly the integration of Africa are collapsing. So how do we integrate? Kenya is the powerhouse of East African community, but you saw what happened in election violence. They are struggling to get their head forward after the good constitution that they are trying to implement, I think the future for Kenya is bright and clear in my view.
You think so? With secessionists at the board at Mombasa, some were arrested today.
Yes, I've been following the violence in Mombasa. But if we manage to get out of the next year's elections, I think with the new constitution, which is well grounded and one of the best constitutions in Africa, I think that
some people might say you are over optimistic. You have 2 indicted ICC suspects standing for president next year. You have had some killings in the center and the east of the country, in the west of the country. You have secessionists at the coast in Mombasa, the tourism hotspot.
Yes, but why don't you talk about the oil resources as well? I think let's try to balance the positives and negatives if we need to look at the future. We cannot paint a dark cloud all over the place.
All right.
So, but yes, I wanted to talk about
the future of Africa in
yes,
half a minute.
The future of Africa. This report has some good conclusions. For example, they are saying that we need a balanced approach to governance, which is essential for development in Africa. We need African countries need to work together, that is integration. I think if we can manage to integrate and get out of our sovereignty cocoons.
Sovereignty cocoons.
Yes. For example, the integration in East Africa, we have challenges with monetary union. We are rushing into the monetary union. We are leaving the people behind. The integration is supposed to be people-centered, private sector-led. But it's government-centered, government-led. It is a cup of tea for leaders. So that's where the problem is. If we integrate people from the bottom-up approach, I think integration is the future for Africa.
Well, Tanzania has gone ahead of us. They've opened offices in all the 443 districts.
Yes, and it is among the top 10
on the integration project. Asuman, Basalirwa, what's your view as we go home tonight?
Well, I think we want to thank the callers. I'm not very sure why Jimmy was being cut out as an activist, I'm concerned. But I think what's really more important, Godfrey was raising the issue of keeping the country on tension. Well, I don't think anybody is being kept on tension. In fact, as a matter of fact, it is police keeping the country on tension.
The security
yes, thereby keeping the country on tension. The other day I went to Dr. Vesige's place. We were going to watch football in Nambole. And I was surprised that there are over 15 policemen
to keep law and order there
at his place. And I said, but Ugandans are being killed elsewhere because of insufficient manpower. And 15 people are just guarding one retired colonel, which I found really very strange. So I think, Godfrey, it is the police that is keeping people on tension.
Did he steal a barricade?
Of course he didn't, and we are waiting for them in court.
Did he steal what?
They said, of course he said he stole, but we are waiting for them in court. But I think Peter made a very important point. If we are to move forward as a country, then we need equity and social justice.
All right.
But this should not be cosmetic statements. This should actually be actualized. Every Ugandan should be able to feel that equity and social justice.
All right.
Everybody should be able to enjoy that equity and social justice.
Okay.
Not to be talked about on radio or in publications, the way you see people mention visions as they are real.
Thank you very much, Mr. Asuman Basalirwa, the only president on the Forum, political president of the Justice Forum Party. Thank you for coming to Spectrum tonight. Ms. Bireete, strong views. She's the director of programs at the Center for Constitutional Governance. And Mr. Charles Rwomushana, former head of political intelligence at State House. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond. Kizito. Spectrum will be back tomorrow. Otherwise, stay positive if you can.
So Mushana is now saved.
Friday, give me for 3